My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 33 years old. And 15 years ago, on a rainy Thursday evening in October of 2009, my parents looked me in the eyes and told me I was no longer their daughter. Not because I committed a crime, not because I betrayed them, but because I was poor. Before I tell you exactly what they said, and trust me, you're going to want to hear every word of it. I need you to understand something. I didn't grow up in a trailer park. I didn't struggle for food or wear hand-me-downs from strangers. I grew up in a 12-bedroom estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. My father, Richard Bennett, managed a hedge fund that cleared 8 figures annually. My mother, Patricia, sat on the boards of 3 charities she never actually visited. We had a housekeeper, a gardener, and a cook. My younger brother, William, had a Porsche for his 16th birthday. I had a trust fund waiting for me the day I turned 25. But here's what they didn't know. By the time I was 18, I had already decided I wanted nothing to do with their world. You see, I wasn't the daughter they ordered. I wasn't delicate enough for their dinner parties. I didn't know how to pretend to care about someone's summer home in the Hamptons. While my mother spent her afternoons planning charity galas that cost more than most families made in a year, I was working weekends at a diner off I-95. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. I wanted to know what the real world felt like. I wanted to earn something with my own hands. My parents hated it. My father would look at my diner uniform like it was a stain on his reputation. "Claire," he'd say, his voice dropping to that disappointed whisper that still echoes in my head. "Bennett's don't serve coffee. Bennett's own the building the coffee is served in." I used to laugh it off. I thought they were being dramatic. I thought, deep down, they were proud that I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet. I was wrong. The summer after I graduated high school in 2009, everything came to a head. I had been accepted to the University of Connecticut on a partial scholarship. I wanted to study business management, not finance, not law. I wanted to build something from the ground up. My father had already arranged my transfer to Yale by sophomore year, through connections, not merit, and my mother had already picked out the sorority she expected me to pledge. But I didn't want Yale. I didn't want their connections. I wanted to earn my degree the way normal people did. On August 14th, 2009, 3 days before I was supposed to move into my dorm at UConn, my father called me into his study. The room smelled like leather and scotch, the way it always did at 7 in the evening. He was sitting behind his mahogany desk, and my mother was standing by the window, looking out at the pool house like she couldn't bear to make eye contact with me. "Sit down, Claire," my father said. I sat. He slid a check across the desk. It was made out to me for $50,000, my first year's tuition at Yale, plus living expenses. "Your mother and I have discussed it," he said. "You're going to Yale. You're going to meet the right people. You're going to become the woman this family needs you to be. And you're going to stop this working-class fantasy before you embarrass us in front of people who matter." I looked at the check. Then I looked at him. "Dad," I said, "I already told you. I'm going to UConn. I got in on my own. I want to do this my way." His face didn't change. Not at first. Then slowly, he reached out and took the check back. "Then you are no longer our daughter," he said. I remember thinking he was joking. I actually laughed. A short, nervous sound that died in my throat when I saw my mother's face. She still wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the pool house like it held the answer to a question she was too afraid to ask. "Dad," I said again, "come on, it's UConn. It's 2 hours away. I'm still going to college." "You don't understand," he said, and his voice was flat, empty, the way he sounded when he fired someone. "This isn't about the school. It's about the principle. You are choosing to be less than you are. You are choosing to be common. And if that's the life you want, then you can have it. But you won't have it under this roof. You won't have it with our name, and you certainly won't have it with our money." My mother finally turned around. Her eyes were dry, not a single tear. That was the part that broke something in me. I could have handled my father's cruelty. I had seen it directed at business rivals, at employees, at waiters who brought the wrong wine. But my mother had always been the soft one, the one who tucked me in, the one who remembered my favorite cake. "Mom?" I whispered. She walked over and stood beside my father's chair, like a queen standing beside her king, like I was a servant who had spoken out of turn. "Your father is right, Claire," she said. "We've given you every advantage, every opportunity, and you spit on it. You embarrass us. Do you know what people say? Do you know what Margaret Holloway asked me last week? She asked if we had adopted you, because no Bennett would choose to work in a diner." I felt the room tilt, not metaphorically, actually tilt. I gripped the arms of the leather chair. "So that's it?" I asked. "I go to Yukon and I'm dead to you." "You're dead to us the moment you walk out that door without that check," my father said. "Your trust fund is dissolved. Your credit cards are canceled. Your name stays on the birth certificate, but that's where it ends. Try to contact us, and we'll file a restraining order. Try to use our name, and we'll sue you for defamation. You want to be common? Be common, but be common somewhere else." I stood up. My legs were shaking. I looked at the two people who had brought me into this world, and I realized I was looking at strangers. "William?" I asked, thinking of my brother. He was 16. He was upstairs playing video games on the 70-inch TV my father had bought him last month. "Does William know?" "William understands what it means to be a Bennett," my father said. "He chose correctly. You chose poorly." I didn't cry. Not then. I think my body was in too much shock to produce tears. I walked out of the study, up the curved staircase to my bedroom, and I stood in the doorway looking at everything I had ever owned: the canopy bed with the silk sheets, the walk-in closet full of clothes I hadn't bought myself, the jewelry box on the dresser, the laptop, the iPhone. I had exactly $47 in my wallet. I had a 1998 Honda Civic that my father had threatened to sell 3 times because it embarrassed the neighbors. I had a duffel bag from summer camp. I took the duffel bag. I packed 3 pairs of jeans, 5 t-shirts, 2 sweaters, underwear, socks, and my high school yearbook. I took the $47. I took the car keys. I left the phone on the bed. My father would cancel the plan by morning anyway. I left the jewelry. I left the clothes with the designer labels. I left the photo albums. I walked down the stairs for the last time. My parents were in the foyer. My father was holding the front door open. It was raining. A hard, cold October rain that smelled like dead leaves and endings. "One last chance," my father said. "Take the check. Go to Yale. Be our daughter." I looked past him, into the rain, and I saw my entire life split into 2 roads. One was warm and dry and golden. The other was dark and cold and terrifying. I stepped into the rain. I drove for 3 hours. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get far enough away that I couldn't see the estate lights in my rearview mirror. At 2 a.m., I pulled into the parking lot of a Motel 6 just outside Bridgeport. The sign buzzed and flickered. The rate was $49 a night. I sat in the car for 20 minutes counting my money. $47, $2 short. I checked under the seats. I found 3 quarters and a gum wrapper. I walked into the lobby. A man named Gary was working the night shift. He had a mustache and a paperback thriller. He looked at my wet hair, my empty hands, my 18-year-old face. "One night?" he asked. "Please," I said. He looked at my money. $47.75. "45, he said, sliding a key across the counter. "And the coffee's free in the morning." Room 217 smelled like mildew and industrial cleaner. The bedspread was orange and brown. The bathroom had a rust stain in the tub. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my wet clothes, and I finally cried. Not because I was scared, not because I was hurt, because for the first time in my life, I was completely alone. And I had no idea if I was brave or just stupid. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on that orange bedspread, staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to the highway hum through the thin walls, and I made a decision. Not a wish, not a prayer, a decision. I would not call them. I would not beg. I would not go back. I would become something they could never ignore, something they could never dismiss, something that would force them to see what they had thrown away. But first, I had to survive. The next morning, I used the free coffee at the motel lobby. Black, bitter, and exactly what I needed. I drove to Yukon with $37 left in my wallet. I walked into the financial aid office at the Wilbur Cross building and I told a woman named Doris Chen exactly what had happened. No tears, no dramatics, just the facts. My parents had cut me off. I had $47. I wanted to attend school. What were my options? Doris didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with respect. She pulled my file. She made some calls. By 4 p.m. that afternoon, she had assembled an emergency aid package, a Pell Grant, a work-study position in the library, a small emergency loan. It wouldn't cover everything, but it would cover enough. "You're going to need a job," she said. "Probably 2. "I'll take 3, I said. And I did. I worked the morning shift at a bakery off Route 195. I worked afternoons shelving books in the Homer Babbage Library. I worked nights as a cashier at a gas station near campus. I slept 4 hours a night. I ate ramen noodles and day-old bagels. I wore the same 5 outfits in rotation. I showered in the dormitory gym because I couldn't afford a dorm room. For the first semester, I slept in my Honda Civic in the parking lot of the North Campus apartments. November in Storrs, Connecticut is not kind. The temperature dropped to 18 degrees. I bought a sleeping bag from Goodwill for $12. I parked under a streetlight because it felt safer. I woke up with frost on the inside of the windows. I kept a thermos of coffee between my knees to stay warm during the night. But here's what they didn't know. Every morning, when I walked into that library, I wasn't just shelving books, I was reading them. Business strategy, economics, entrepreneurship. I devoured case studies like they were oxygen. I took notes on napkins. I sketched business plans in the margins of my textbooks. In February of my freshman year, everything changed. I was working the night shift at the gas station when a man pulled up in a battered Ford F-150. He was in his 50s, with calloused hands and a jacket that had seen better decades. He bought a coffee and a pack of gum, and he noticed me reading a textbook on supply chain management between customers. "You in school?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I said. "Studying business?" "Trying to." He looked at me for a long moment, at my tired eyes, at my thrift store coat, at the textbook I was highlighting with a pen I'd stolen from the library lost and found. "My name is Joe Castellano," he said. "I own a small trucking company, 12 trucks, nothing fancy. But I'm looking for someone who understands logistics and isn't afraid of hard work. You want an internship that pays more than minimum wage?" I looked at him. "Is this a joke?" "No," he said. "But it won't be easy. You'll be loading trucks at 4 a.m. You'll be tracking inventory on software from 1998. You'll be dealing with drivers who don't like taking orders from a 19-year-old girl." "When do I start?" I asked. Joe became my mentor. My second father, though I never called him that. He taught me that business wasn't about boardrooms and hedge funds. It was about showing up when you didn't want to. It was about knowing every employee's name. It was about treating a $10 contract with the same respect as a $1 million one. By my junior year, I had saved enough to rent a studio apartment. It was 400 square feet. The heat worked half the time, but it was mine. By my senior year, I had identified a gap in the market. Small businesses needed logistics support, but they couldn't afford the big firms. I started a company called ClearPath Logistics from that studio apartment. I had a laptop I bought refurbished for $200. I had a phone I paid for with prepaid minutes. I had Joe's advice ringing in my ears: under-promise and over-deliver every single time. The first year, I made $34,000. I cried when I filed my taxes because it was the first money I had ever truly earned. The third year, I hired my first employee, a single mom named Rosa who needed flexible hours. The fifth year, ClearPath had 12 clients and 3 trucks. The eighth year, we expanded to Boston and New York. The 10th year, a private equity firm offered me $14 million for 40% of the company. I said no. The 12th year, I said yes to a different offer, one that valued ClearPath at $420 million. But wait until you hear what happened in year 15. Because 15 years after my father told me I was no longer his daughter, I received a phone call. Not from him, not from my mother, but from a journalist at the Hartford Business Journal. She was writing a profile on the 50 most successful self-made entrepreneurs in New England under the age of 35. She wanted to know my story. Where did I come from? Who were my parents? What advantages had I started with? I told her the truth. I came from Greenwich. My parents were Richard and Patricia Bennett, and the only advantage I started with was $47 and the certainty that I would never go back. The article published on October 14, 2024, exactly 15 years and 1 month after I walked out into the rain. It went viral. Within 48 hours, my net worth was public knowledge. ClearPath had gone public 6 months earlier. My shares were valued at just over $800 million. I owned real estate in 4 states. I sat on the boards of 3 charities I actually visited. And my parents? My father had retired in 2019 after a series of bad investments. His hedge fund had collapsed during the pandemic. My mother's charities had dried up. Their estate in Greenwich had been mortgaged 3 times. According to the article, the Bennett family fortune, which had once seemed infinite, was now estimated at roughly $600 million, most of it tied up in debt and depreciating assets. I was worth more than their entire family tree combined. But here's the thing. I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Because I knew, deep in my bones, that the real test hadn't come. The money was just numbers. The real victory would be looking them in the eyes and knowing they saw what they had lost. And I was about to get that chance. The phone call came 3 days after the article published. I was in my office on the 32nd floor of the ClearPath headquarters in downtown Hartford. The office has floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the Connecticut River. I had designed it myself, minimalist, clean. No photographs of family on the desk. Just a single framed quote: "The best revenge is not being like them." Marcus Aurelius. I read it every morning. My assistant, Kendra, buzzed through. "Claire, there's a call on line 3, a Patricia Bennett. She says she's your mother." I set down my pen. I didn't move for 10 seconds. I counted each one. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, all the way to 10. My heart wasn't racing. It was doing something worse. It was remembering the foyer, the rain, the way she stood beside my father's chair and told me I embarrassed her. "Put her through," I said. The line clicked. Silence. Then that voice. The same voice that used to read me bedtime stories. The same voice that had asked Margaret Holloway if perhaps I was adopted. "Claire," she said. "Claire, is that you?" "Mrs. Bennett," I said. "Not Mom. Never Mom again. What can I do for you? I heard her breath catch. Just a hitch, a tiny fracture in the porcelain. I read the article, she said. In the Hartford Business Journal. We read it, your father and I. We had no idea. We had no idea you were so successful. Now you do, I said. Claire, she said, and her voice dropped into that familiar register, the one she used when she wanted something, when she was asking my father for a new car, when she was convincing the gardener to work overtime. Your father and I, we've been talking. We think it's time to put the past behind us, time to heal. You were always so stubborn, Claire, just like your father, but family is family, and we miss you. I looked out at the river. The October sun was setting, turning the water into molten gold. I thought about the nights in my Honda Civic, the frost on the windows, the ramen noodles, the day I couldn't afford antibiotics for a sinus infection and just suffered through it for 3 weeks. You miss me, I repeated. Not a question, a statement. Desperately, she said. And then, the real reason. It always comes, doesn't it? The hook behind the bait. We're having a small gathering next Saturday, at the house. Nothing formal, just some old friends. The Holloways, the Whitmores, the Callaways. It would mean so much if you came. If they saw you, if they knew you were, well, if they knew. If they knew their disowned daughter was richer than they were. If they knew they hadn't won. If she had a successful daughter to parade around like a prize. I almost laughed, but I didn't, because in that moment, I realized something. I had spent 15 years building an empire, and I had told myself it was for me, for my future, for my dignity. But some small wounded part of me had been building it for this exact phone call, to hear the need in her voice, to hear the desperation. I'll think about it, I said. Claire, I'll think about it, I repeated. Goodbye, Mrs. Bennet. I hung up. I sat in my chair for a long time, watching the sun disappear behind the hills. Then I called Joe Castellano. He was 70 now, semi-retired, living in a condo in Mystic with his wife and a golden retriever named Truck. Joe, I said. They called. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you going? I don't know. Yes, you do, he said. You've been going since the day you walked out that door. Question is, what are you going to do when you get there? I thought about it. I thought about every sleepless night, every humiliation, every time I wanted to quit and almost picked up the phone. I thought about the woman I was at 18, shivering in a sleeping bag, and the woman I was now, sitting in an office worth more than my childhood home. I'm going to tell the truth, I said, and then I'm going to leave. Joe laughed. That's my girl. I spent the next 6 days preparing, not emotionally. I had done that work years ago, but practically. I called my lawyer. I called my publicist. I made sure that whatever happened in that house, I would be protected. I wouldn't let them twist the narrative. I wouldn't let them claim I had abandoned them. I had the documentation, the canceled credit card statements, the letter my father had sent via his attorney in 2010, formally severing financial ties, the restraining order threat, which he had never followed through on because, I suspect, he didn't want the paperwork to exist. I bought a dress, not from a designer they would recognize. It was from a small boutique in New Haven run by a woman who had started her business with a microloan from a program I funded. It was midnight blue. Simple. Elegant. It cost $400. I paid cash. I hired a car, not a limo, a black Mercedes S-Class, professional, understated. I told Kendra to clear my schedule for Saturday evening. I didn't tell her where I was going. She would find out soon enough. Saturday arrived cold and clear, the kind of October evening in Connecticut where the air smells like wood smoke and the leaves crunch under your feet like old secrets. The driver pulled up to the estate at 6:47 p.m. I had timed it deliberately, not early enough to be eager, not late enough to be rude, just exactly when I wanted to arrive. I hadn't seen the house in 15 years. It looked smaller, or maybe I had just grown. The iron gates were the same. The gravel driveway was the same. The fountain in the circular drive was still spitting water into the darkening sky. But the paint was peeling in places. The gardens were overgrown. The Porsche my brother had received at 16 was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a 10-year-old BMW sat in the guest parking space. The driver opened my door. I stepped out. I was wearing the blue dress. My hair was pulled back. I wore no jewelry except a pair of small silver earrings I had bought myself at a craft fair in 2012, back when $20 felt like a fortune. I walked to the front door. Before I could knock, it opened. William stood there. My baby brother, the one who had chosen correctly. He was 31 now. He had my father's jawline and my mother's eyes. He was wearing a suit that fit poorly and shoes that needed polishing. His hair was thinning. He looked tired. He looked ordinary. "Claire," he said. His voice was soft, almost reverent. "You came." "Hello, William," I said. "Are you going to let me in, or do I need to buy the house first?" He stepped aside, and I walked back into the house that had thrown me out. The foyer smelled exactly the same. Lemon polish and lilies and something else. Something I couldn't name, but felt in my chest like a fist. The chandelier still hung from the vaulted ceiling, though 3 of its bulbs were out. The grandfather clock still ticked in the corner, though it was 7 minutes slow. Some things don't change. Some things just decay slowly enough that the people inside them don't notice. William walked beside me, not ahead of me. That was different. When we were children, he always walked ahead, the golden child leading the way. Now he kept glancing at me like he was trying to memorize my face, like he was looking for the 18-year-old girl he had watched walk into the rain. "They're in the great room," he said quietly. "Mom invited about 20 people, the Holloways, the Whitmores, some others. She told them you were coming. She made it sound like a reunion, like you'd been away at school or something." "Did she tell them I was disowned?" I asked. He stopped walking. We were at the base of the staircase, the same staircase I had descended with my duffel bag 15 years ago. He looked at his shoes. "She told them you were headstrong," he said. "That you needed to find yourself, that the family gave you space." I laughed. One sharp note that echoed off the marble floors. "Space. Is that what we're calling it?" "Claire," he said, and his voice cracked. Just a little. Just enough. "I was 16. I didn't know what they were going to do. I didn't know until after you were gone. And by then I was too scared to say anything. I took the Porsche. I took the trust fund. I took everything they offered, and I told myself you were fine, that you were strong enough. But I knew what they did was wrong." I looked at him, at the tired eyes, at the cheap suit, and I felt something I didn't expect. Not forgiveness, not yet, but pity. Because I could see it now. He had chosen correctly, and it had cost him everything that mattered. He was still living in their shadow, still trying to be the Bennett they wanted, and he was suffocating. "William," I said, "I'm not here for you. I'm not here for them. I'm here for the girl who slept in a parking lot. Now open the door." He did. The great room was exactly as I remembered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the back gardens, a fireplace big enough to stand in, Persian rugs that cost more than most houses, and people, 20 or so, holding champagne flutes, wearing diamonds and designer labels, talking about summer homes and stock portfolios in voices that carried just loudly enough to be overheard. The conversation didn't stop all at once. It died in stages. A pause here, a turned head there, a whisper, then silence. I stood in the doorway and I watched them see me. Margaret Holloway was the first to recognize me. She was 70 now, thin as a reed, with a face full of fillers and a necklace full of pearls. She had been the one who asked if I was adopted. I remembered her perfectly. She looked at me, then at my dress, then at my posture, straight-backed, shoulders down, chin up, and I saw the confusion flicker across her face. She was looking for the diner girl, the embarrassment, the cautionary tale. She didn't find her. Then my mother saw me. She was standing by the fireplace, wearing a champagne-colored gown that had probably been expensive 10 years ago. Her hand went to her throat. Her lips parted. She took a step forward. "Claire," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Oh, Claire, you came." She rushed toward me, arms outstretched, theatrical, exactly the performance I expected. She embraced me, and I let her. I stood perfectly still, my arms at my sides, while she squeezed me and made a small crying sound for the benefit of the room. "Everyone," she said, pulling back, but keeping her hands on my shoulders. "Everyone, look who's here, my daughter, my brilliant, successful daughter. We are just so proud of her, so proud of everything she's accomplished." The room murmured, polite applause. I looked past my mother's shoulder and saw my father. He was standing by the bar cart, a glass of scotch in his hand. He hadn't moved. He was wearing a navy suit, the same cut he had always worn, but it hung looser now. He looked smaller, older. The man who had once seemed like a giant to me now looked like just another aging businessman who had made more enemies than friends. Our eyes met. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just looked at me, and I saw it. The calculation, the reassessment. He was looking at my dress, my posture, the driver who had opened my door, the way the room had gone quiet when I entered. He was doing the math, and I could see in the slight tremor of his hand around the glass that he didn't like the answer. "Richard," my mother called out, her voice bright and brittle. "Richard, come say hello to your daughter." He walked over, slow, measured, the way he walked into boardrooms when he was about to fire someone. He stopped 3 feet away from me. "Claire," he said. "Mr. Bennett," I replied. The room went completely silent. You could hear the ice melting in someone's glass. My mother's smile froze. "Claire, darling, don't be silly. It's Dad." "No," I said, and my voice carried, clear, calm, not loud, but loud enough. "It's not Dad. It hasn't been Dad since October 13th, 2009, since he sat me down in his study and told me I was no longer his daughter. Since he offered me a $50,000 check to abandon my scholarship and go to Yale. Since I chose UConn instead, and he opened the front door and told me to walk out into the rain. Since my mother stood beside him and told me I embarrassed her. Since they canceled my credit cards, dissolved my trust fund, and threatened to file a restraining order if I ever contacted them again. I reached into my purse. I pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. I held it up. "I kept the letter," I said. "The one your attorney sent me in March of 2010. Formal severance of financial ties. It says, and I quote, 'The Bennett family acknowledges no legal, moral, or familial obligation to Claire Ann Bennett from this date forward. Signed by your lawyer, Richard Bennett, client.'" I looked around the room, at the hollow faces, at the dropped jaws. at Margaret Holloway, who was clutching her pearls like they might save her. I had $47 that night, I said. I slept in my car for 4 months. I worked 3 jobs. I ate food from dumpsters behind bakeries. And I built a company. From nothing. From less than nothing. I built ClearPath Logistics, which is currently valued at just over $400 million. I employ 412 people. I fund scholarship programs for kids whose parents throw them out. I build housing for people who have nowhere to sleep. I turned back to my father. His face had gone gray. So no, I said. He's not my dad, and she's not my mom. And this. I gestured around the room at the fading grandeur, at the peeling paint, at the desperate people holding their breath. This is not my family. My father's hand tightened around his Scotch glass. I could see the tendons in his neck standing out like cables. He had always controlled every room he entered. He had always been the one to decide when conversations ended, when deals were closed, when people were dismissed. But he wasn't in control anymore, and the realization was destroying him. That's enough, he said. His voice was low, dangerous, the same voice he had used in his study 15 years ago. You will not come into my home and humiliate this family. Your home? I asked. I looked around the room, at the water stain on the ceiling, at the chipped molding, at the furniture that hadn't been updated since I was 12. Is it still your home, Dad? Or is it the bank's? I know about the second mortgage you took in 2021 and the third in 2023. I know the hedge fund collapsed. I know the IRS has been asking questions. I know that this house, the house where you told me I was no longer your daughter, is currently leveraged at 120% of its market value. The room gasped, a collective intake of breath. Margaret Holloway actually dropped her champagne flute. It shattered on the Persian rug, but nobody moved to clean it up. My father's face went from gray to red. You know nothing, he spat. You know nothing about my finances. You know nothing about what it takes to maintain a legacy. I know everything, I said. Because I built one, a real one, not a house of cards held together by lies and intimidation. You see, when you run a legitimate business, people actually want to invest in you. They don't just tolerate you because they're afraid of you. My mother stepped between us. Her hands were shaking now. The performance had collapsed. The mask had slipped. Claire, she whispered, please, not here, not in front of everyone. We're your parents. We gave you life. We gave you everything. You gave me life, I agreed. And then you tried to take it back when I wouldn't let you control it. You didn't give me everything. You gave me things. And then you took them away when I refused to be your puppet. There's a difference between parenting and ownership. You never learned it. I turned to the room, to the 20 faces staring at me with a mixture of horror and fascination, to the people who had whispered about me for 15 years, the cautionary tale, the ungrateful daughter, the girl who chose a diner over a dynasty. How many of you knew? I asked. How many of you knew they threw me out? How many of you heard the stories they told? That I ran away, that I was unstable, that I rejected them. How many of you believed it? Silence. Let me tell you what really happened, I said. I was 18. I had been accepted to college on a scholarship I earned. I wanted to study business. I wanted to build something. And because I wouldn't let my father buy my way into Yale, because I wouldn't let my mother dress me up like a doll for her charity galas, they opened the front door and told me to leave. In the rain. With $47. They canceled my trust fund. They threatened me with lawyers. They erased me. I looked at William. He was standing by the fireplace, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. "Tell them, William," I said softly. "Tell them what you told me in the foyer. Tell them you knew. Tell them you were 16, and you knew, and you said nothing." Every head in the room turned to him. He looked like a trapped animal. His eyes darted to my father, then to my mother, then back to me. "I was a kid," he said. His voice was barely audible. "You were old enough to take the Porsche," I said. "You were old enough to cash the trust fund checks. You were old enough to know that your sister was sleeping in a car while you were sleeping in silk sheets. And you were definitely old enough to know that what they did was wrong. But you stayed silent because it was easier, because it was profitable. Because that's what Bennetts do, isn't it? We choose correctly. We choose money over family. We choose power over love." My father slammed his glass down on the bar cart. Scotch splashed across the marble. "Get out," he said. His voice was shaking. "Get out of my house." I didn't move. I just looked at him. And for the first time in my life, I saw him clearly. Not as a giant, not as a monster, just as a sad, angry old man who had traded his daughter for control and lost both. "You don't have to ask me twice," I said. "I left once. I can leave again. But before I go, let me make something very clear to everyone in this room. I am not the broken daughter who crawled back. I am not the cautionary tale who finally came to her senses. I am a self-made woman who survived the worst thing a child can survive, the rejection of the people who were supposed to love her unconditionally, and I thrived. Not because of you, in spite of you." I reached into my purse again. I pulled out a business card. Clear Path Logistics, my name, my title, CEO. I set it on the side table next to Margaret Holloway. "If any of you ever find yourselves on the street with $47 in a dream," I said, "call me. I fund scholarships, I fund housing, I fund second chances, because I know what it's like to have nobody. And I swore I would spend my life making sure other people don't have to feel what I felt." I turned back to my parents. One last look, not with hate. Hate would have meant they still mattered enough to hurt me. I looked at them with something far more devastating. Indifference. "Goodbye," I said. "Don't call me again. I won't answer." I walked toward the door. The crowd parted like water. Nobody spoke. Nobody touched me. I was halfway across the foyer when I heard footsteps behind me. "Claire." "William." I stopped. I didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was cracking. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For staying silent. For taking what they offered. For not standing up for you. I was a coward. I've been a coward my whole life. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know. I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. I just never had the guts to say it." I stood there for a long moment. The grandfather clock ticked its 7-minute slow rhythm. The rain from 15 years ago seemed to echo in my ears. "William," I said, still not turning around. "Pride without courage is just vanity. If you want to be proud of me, be brave enough to be proud of yourself first. Stop living in their shadow. Build something. Or don't. But stop being a ghost in a house that's already haunted." Then I walked out the front door, into the cold October air, into the dark, into the rest of my life. The Mercedes was waiting at the bottom of the driveway, just where I had left it. The driver opened the door without a word. He must have heard the silence from inside. He must have seen the faces in the windows. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just held the door and I got in. We pulled away slowly, gravel crunching under the tires, the estate getting smaller in the rearview mirror. I didn't look back. I had looked back enough. For 15 years, some part of me had been standing in that rain, waiting for them to open the door, waiting for an apology that would have meant something, waiting for parents who never existed outside of my hope. But as we turned onto the main road, I felt something shift. Not a weight lifting, something deeper. A door closing, the final door. The one that had been wedged open by anger and ambition and the need to prove them wrong. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I never had. The only person I needed to convince was the girl in the parking lot. The girl with frost on her windows and fire in her chest. And I know, she would be proud of me. My phone buzzed. A text from Kendra. "Everything okay? You have a board call at 9 a.m. tomorrow." I typed back, "Everything is exactly as it should be." Then I called Joe. "Well?" he asked. "I told the truth," I said, and then I left. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "How do you feel?" I looked out at the Connecticut darkness, at the trees silhouetted against the sky, at the road ahead clear and open. "Free," I said. "I feel free." The next morning, the emails started, not from my parents, from guests at the party. Margaret Holloway sent a handwritten letter to my office. She apologized. She said she had known the truth all along, or suspected it, and had done nothing. She wanted to donate to my scholarship fund. I sent her the link. I didn't send forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't something you give to people who apologize 15 years too late. It's something you give yourself when you're ready. And I was ready. William called 3 times. I didn't answer. On the 4th try, he left a voicemail. He had moved out of the estate. He had taken a job in Boston, a real job, not one arranged by our father. He wanted to meet for coffee, not to ask for money, just to talk. I saved the message. I haven't called back yet. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. But the fact that I get to choose, that's the victory. My parents, they sent one letter, through their attorney, of course. It said they were disappointed in my public behavior and hoped I would reconsider my position for the sake of family unity. I framed it. I hung it in the hallway outside my office, next to the photo of my first studio apartment, next to the picture of my Honda Civic, next to the quote from Marcus Aurelius. Because some reminders aren't about bitterness. They're about boundaries. They're about remembering who you were, who they were, and who you chose to become. Part 8. So here's what I want you to take from this. If you're watching this and someone has made you feel small, if someone has told you that your dreams are too big or too common or too embarrassing, if someone who was supposed to love you made you feel like you had to earn their affection through obedience, listen to me carefully. You don't need their permission to be extraordinary. You don't need their money to be successful. You don't need their name to matter. The best revenge isn't a confrontation in a great room. It isn't a net worth that dwarfs theirs. It isn't even the moment they realize what they lost. The best revenge is building a life so full, so authentic, so completely yours that their rejection becomes irrelevant, that their approval becomes unnecessary, that their memory becomes just a footnote in a story that is so much bigger than them. I built Clear Path because I had nowhere to go. I built it because I was cold and scared and alone. And I kept building it because I discovered something they never taught me. Work is dignity. Earning is freedom. And the only person's respect you truly need is your own. Now I want to hear from you. In the comments below, tell me about a time someone underestimated you. Tell me about a moment you chose yourself over their expectations. Type your story. I read every single one, and I promise you, there is someone reading this right now who needs to hear exactly what you have to say. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell. because I have more stories to tell. Stories about second chances, stories about survival, stories about the kind of justice that doesn't come from a courtroom, but from a life well lived. And if you want to hear what happened when my brother finally showed up at my office unannounced 6 months later, check out the video linked right here. Trust me, you won't believe what he brought with him. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 33 years old, and I am exactly who I choose to be.